Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Erik, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. What you're doing is actually really interesting to me and kind of something that I think is really useful to a lot of people. But maybe before we kind of get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and kind of cover your background and kind of where you grew up.
Sure. Well, as it relates to growing up, I'm kind of one of those international kids. I was born in Germany, lived in the UK, lived in France, came to the US when I was fairly young, and spent most of my life in Southern California. Professionally, I've always really been a product guy. I studied economics in college. When I graduated, I went and worked in aerospace. Got to work on fascinating research projects that most people don't get to, types of technology most people don't get to actually know about. But realized that big companies were totally different animals than the type of the type of thing that I wanted to deal with. So after a couple of years, it was difficult to leave, but I jumped into internet technology, and I've been building product businesses within technology companies for probably the last 15 years. I was at a company called Epic, where I re-engineered a variety of their product lines to profitability. That company was subsequently acquired. I went to a company called Foundstone, and was one of the first product hires there, where we led information security software development with vulnerability assessment testing and things like that within in the software space. That company was acquired by McAfee. I started my first company, a company called NT Objectives, that focused on application security. So as you can tell, I spent a good bit of time in the information security world. I ran that company for about 5 years and realized that the B2B enterprise technology was just not something I was too passionate about. I was able to leave that company. My co-founders ran that until it had been subsequently acquired not long ago. And during my sort of wandering through the desert, I kind of realized the things I wanted to work on were things that were more relevant to me. And ultimately that led me to start Younity.
Okay. So I guess what is Younity, and kind of what was the inspiration behind why you started it?
Sure. Well, the inspiration was pretty simple. It was born out of necessity. Younity essentially is trying to change computing.
Okay.
Younity is about making all of the content you've ever bought or created your whole life instantly available on every device you have, as if it's stored there. The impetus really was this realization that if you look back about 10 years or so, really before the advent of the smartphone, computing was a productivity task. You used to go to the computer to go do something like write an email or create a document or something like that. But it's very task specific. And since the smartphone market has grown to become virtually ubiquitous around the world, computing has totally changed. People compute now all day, every day, for every single reason.
Sure.
And this has resulted in people becoming multi-device users, right? Especially in the U.S., you look at a lot of people and say, well, it's a consumer society. They just buy lots of stuff. The reality is that we don't have lots of devices because we want to buy things. We have lots of devices because they're contextually relevant to different things we're doing or different situations throughout the day.
Totally.
So if you're walking down the street and you want to find a restaurant, you don't go grab a laptop, you grab your smartphone.
Yep.
Likewise, if you want to write, let's say, a blog post or create a proposal, you want a keyboard and a bigger screen. So the way that we now compute has fundamentally changed. We use different devices at different times. And while computing has gotten better, it's fast, it's beautiful, computers have loads of features, they're more or less built the exact same way they were 10 years ago. When I use a device, content gets stuck.
Yep.
And the operating system only really cares about that. So we've seen growth in sectors of tech like online storage, which were really thought to be the holy grail, if you will, of how we solve this. We put a hard drive in the sky, and that then gives us access. And really before starting Younity, that was really the course I took. I was just going to put all of my stuff into online storage.
Sure.
And then I'd have access to everything. Of course, the problem is that A, it's expensive. B, it's quite complicated. You always have to manage it and make sure things get in there. But really the Achilles heel with online storage was that it didn't care about all of my media libraries, like my iTunes catalog or my Adobe Lightroom catalog.
Sure.
Because those are database-driven applications, and if you put that into online storage, it has no idea what it is. So if you want to browse your music, for example, the way that you do PDFs or Word documents, it works great. But if you want to access your music the way you're accustomed to, let's say in iTunes, where you listen to an artist or a genre or a playlist, or with your photos, you go to a photo album, they just don't understand what those things were. So that was really the goal behind Unity, was not to compete in a world of big storage companies, but to change the access model of how we browse and access all of our content, regardless of where it was stored.
Sure. Okay. So when you say regardless of where it's stored, what does that mean exactly?
Well, the typical user has, in general, especially in the U.S., on average, over 80% of the population has at least 2 computers and at least a smartphone.
Sure.
More and more so, this is including a tablet these days.
Yeah.
And the typical frustration people have is content is fragmented across devices. Some of it's on the laptop, some of it's on the desktop, some's on the phone, some's on the tablet. And the act of what we call synchronizing all of this is difficult, if not impossible. To us, the issue is not a lack of storage, right? Our belief is that everyone has more than enough storage. If your computer runs out of storage, my guess is you either go buy a hard drive or you buy a new computer. Right?
Yep.
No one just gives up on computing at that point.
Sure, yeah.
So there's no shortage of storage. The problem is that the storage is disassociated from different devices. If there's a hard drive on your laptop, it's not connected to the one on the desktop. So we don't care if content's stored on a computer or if it's stored in an online storage account. The patents that we've been able to obtain and the technology we build readdresses files you have from hard drives to identities, so that all of your content is yours. Instead of it being tied to the hard drive or the device that you used, it's now tied to you individually. And by doing that, we can unify content across all the devices you have, even if one device is Windows, the other is Mac, one is iOS, and with the launch of our Android app later this month, Android as well. So if you have heterogeneous different platforms that you use, and you have different amounts of storage and different content and different devices, Unity can unify all of this and give you access to it because we tie content to your identity instead of a hard drive.
Okay, so in the background, and without getting kind of too technical, so if I have like a Mac, an iPad, and a smartphone, it syncs all the content into the cloud, or how does that kind of work?
So at the moment, what Unity does is it gleans all of the content on each of those devices.
Okay.
It looks at basic things like what is the file name, right? What is the file type? Is it an image? Is it a song? But then what it does is it mines additional data out of it and starts looking at things like, okay, it was a photo. What camera did you shoot it with?
Okay.
Is it in any photo albums in your applications? So we now understand all the types of content you have and how have you curated that content. Over 90% of the content people have is media. Music,
Sure.
photos, or videos.
Yep.
We have so much media that we use applications like Apple Photos or Adobe Lightroom to organize photos, or iTunes to organize music.
Yep.
So what happens is that curation is how you've organized content so you can discover and access it. What Unity does is it learns about all of that via the creation of metadata, so that it can then build a single user interface on every device you have, so you can access it and stream it individually from those devices. So it's very peer-to-peer. It's connecting devices together so they share their content, so that they can access each other's content from a single UI.
Okay, interesting. So can I share that content as well with others, or is it just tied to me personally?
You can share with others, and it's done in a somewhat different way. With Unity, when I share, let's say my favorite new album with you that I just
Sure.
downloaded on iTunes, I'm not actually giving it to you. I'm letting you stream it from my computer.
Oh, interesting.
If you share, let's say, a GoPro video with me, which is quite hard. GoPros shoot incredibly high resolution video, and those are big files.
Sure.
Those files are hard to even synchronize to the cloud because, well, you have to have a lot of storage. It takes a lot of time. And oftentimes people don't want to download those. They just want to look at your video and not necessarily own it. With Unity, if you share that video with me, I get a simple notification on my smartphone, and I stream that from your computer.
Okay, interesting. So do I have to have my computer on then, or is it, even if my computer's offline, is it fine?
Right now, the computers have to be on. It's because we're creating peer-to-peer connections between devices. They're streaming in real time as you access things. We do make it to where if you know your computer will be off, you can download your content. So if you're going to, let's say, get on a flight or go to a rural area, you can download some music or movies or documents that you need. But ultimately, our plan this year and subsequently in the next several months is to announce the first of several partnerships with online storage companies, where our goal is to increase the value of their services by A, reducing that complexity by putting all of your content into online storage, but then B, letting you access that content while maintaining that organization that you have. Like I said before, if you put an iTunes catalog in, let's say, Dropbox, it doesn't know what it is. All
Sure.
it sees is a database.
Yeah.
But with Unity, we understand what that catalog is. We can still let you browse your music by artists, by playlists, things like that, but stream it from a source like an online storage account that is always on and never turned off.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually really cool. And that's kind of what, when we first chatted months ago, that's what really appealed to me about your platform, is because I've been basically struggling with this issue for a number of years, and I haven't sorted it out, and I'm in the tech space. And so I know this is a huge issue for tech people and non-technical tech people and kind of everybody in between, right? Because yeah, like I have stuff in Google Drive, I have stuff in Dropbox, and I need to clean it up because sometimes I can't find stuff in there. And you're right, like I put certain things in there, and the computer has no idea, or those sort of services have no idea what the files are in some cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're describing is what most people do. Most people do not pay for their online storage services. We all have a whole variety of ones that have whatever amount of free storage we're able to get from them. And so, of course, this means that our content's not only fragmented across the devices we have, it also ends up getting fragmented across all these different services that we
Sure.
use. So, a problem that was bad to some degree, got worse.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that simply don't want these vendors to have their content because of privacy or security concerns.
Yep.
And that's one of the main appealing things, I think, to using Unity without online storage is that it's entirely private. We never touch your data. We don't store we don't have storage servers. We don't have data about you or data about your files. Forget getting hacked. If someone just went to the data center and took all of our servers and they crack the encryption on all of them, ultimately the only thing they're really going to get is your email address, which is a username to your Unity account.
Okay, and most people, it's not really that hard to get somebody's email address if you really want it, right? Exactly. So you're right. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So when you add kind of these storage services, how is that going to kind of like, is it going to make it pretty clear for the user that like, okay, now we're pulling data from kind of Dropbox or Google Drive, or is it kind of up to the user to manage that, or how are you guys kind of going to handle that?
Well, so obviously, if we do integrations with online storage, it's very opt-in, right? There's nothing happens automatically. We don't just take your content and put it anywhere.
Sure.
To us, it's the opportunity in a very contextually relevant way that if you try to access something that, let's say, is stored on your laptop and it's in your backpack,
okay,
you can't. That laptop's off. It's not connected to the internet.
Sure.
We can access content that is on a computer that's sleeping or hibernating, but not if it's effectively turned off. So at that point, users can decide, you know what, I don't want to experience this again. If my laptop is in my backpack, as it frequently is, I want to make sure I can still access my stuff. You can enable Unity to manage all of your content going into an online storage service.
Okay.
So we box it all up. We store it there. You never have to lift a finger. You don't have to configure it or organize it. You don't have to remember that if you do something, you got to put it there. And we'll pull it from there if we need to access it because another device is off.
Okay.
So it's very simple and it's very transparent in the sense the user does not need to do anything.
Okay.
In the sense that to enable such functionality, you certainly have to opt in and choose to do it. And ultimately, as is going to be the case universally, you're going to have to pay for the storage. We're
Sure.
not going to sell it. It's not going to be something that we offer. we don't want anyone's content, quite frankly, for a whole variety of reasons. As I mentioned earlier, I
Sure.
spent quite a while in the information security industry, and I sleep much better at night knowing that we have nothing that can get taken. So
Sure.
we'll never be a storage company. We're, in fact, an access company, and that's what we think we're pretty good at.
No, sure, and that makes a lot of sense. Like I pay for both Dropbox and Google Drive, and I store different stuff on both of those, and it's kind of stupid. But I sometimes I basically have they're cloned almost of each other for the most part, but that's a whole other issue. So I get that. I totally get what you guys are doing, and I think it's really useful for people. So kind of like walk me through as kind of a non-technical user. How do I go from basically like downloading the app to getting my stuff on devices? Like just kind of walk the user through. So I have to put it on my desktop, and then I get the iOS and then eventually or Android app, and then just kind of walk through that process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But it's very, very simple in the sense that we built Unity for typical people who don't really like software. So there's no configuration or management.
Okay.
You simply go to our website, www.getunity.com.
Okay.
So admittedly, it's spelled a little weird with YOUNITY. You download our desktop software. When you install it, essentially the first thing it does is it starts looking through and indexing all of your hard drive. Right, so by default, it looks at everything under your user account. So if it's Kevin Horick / and then the desktop folder, the documents folder, music, pictures, things like that, we completely ignore system files. So we'll never be looking at the operating system or other esoteric types of files or parts of directories and things like that. So Unity will go and discover all the content, and then it starts analyzing that content, and it stores all this metadata on that computer.
Okay.
So if you install it on your laptop, that stays on your laptop. You install it on your desktop, it also stays on that desktop. And the interesting thing about Unity is that you can install it on multiple computers, and it'll ultimately merge and unify all of this content into one view on your phone.
Okay.
So once it's done, it's scanning, and that depends. The duration depends on how much stuff you have. On my iMac at home, I've got about 1.3 terabytes of files. It's something like maybe 80 to 100,000 files. It takes about 30 minutes. 20,
oh, wow. That's pretty
minutes.
Quick, actually.
It's pretty fast. We try and do it as quick as possible because people are impatient.
Sure.
We'll be making that machine do some work so that we can do it that quickly.
Sure.
But once that's done, essentially Unity just sits there and listens and waits for, let's say, you to install Unity on your iPhone. You register with your account, and at that point, it's going to ask for the metadata that are on your computers. So all of this is typically peer-to-peer, unless your network is really poor. And if so, then we run it through what's called a relay server, which is encrypted. So from your computer to your phone, there's an SSL connection. All of the metadata goes right to your phone, and your phone now knows everything on all those computers. And you can browse it at once. You don't have to choose, do I want to look at content on the laptop or the desktop? And it doesn't matter if one computer is Windows and one is Mac. You have one single view, and when you try to access, let's say, a song, it'll stream that song on demand. It'll instantly make it available. And if it's a type of, let's say, music format that an iPhone doesn't play, on the fly, it'll transcode it to some format that is compatible with your iPhone. And this whole process takes anywhere from, one to, if you're on the same network, it's about 1 second. If let's say your computer is in San Francisco and you're in Japan, it'll maybe take 3 seconds for that song to start playing. It's very, very quick and optimized essentially to understand what type of file is Kevin trying to stream and what type of device is he streaming it to.
That's awesome. So, I guess a big use case for a lot of people, I think, would be being able to access their iTunes library while they're in their car driving around just through like a cell phone or a cell phone tower connection.
Yeah, I think the easiest example that I think all of us relate to is typically you buy a bunch of music, let's say, you have this big catalog, and you have your phone, it doesn't fit it all, right?
Sure,
Most phones get filled up with photos and apps and all kinds of stuff. So ultimately, and I always do this every time I get a new iPhone, I ask everyone at the Apple Store, hey, how often do you guys have to just move things from one place to the other because no one has ever synced their phone?
Sure.
And it's always like 80 to 90% of people. No one syncs their phone.
Nope.
So with Unity, the best way of looking at it, you never need to, right? Everything is available to you on demand. You simply open Unity, and yeah, your whole music collection is there. You all of a sudden some song pops into your head that you hear on the radio, and you think, wow, I've been listening to that since college. I want to listen to that album right now. And you have it on your computer. You just listen to it. Or if you're hanging out with friends and you're talking about how great the snowboarding trip is and they want to see video, no problem. You just, all that GoPro video or whatever high-res video that you put back on your computer that won't fit on your phone, just stream it to your phone. Or quite frankly, if you want to, just share it with them so they could see it on their phone. Or, if you're at a family member's house, and, I do this all the time. My kids want to watch one of their movies, but we're at someone else's house. I just open up Unity and I send it to the TV if there's an Apple TV there. And they get to watch their movie, and I don't have to worry about carting around, whether it's all the videos or the photos or all the music that we're pretty much continuously trying to access.
Sure. So I'm curious then, just to kind of a question around the movie space, and you kind of mentioned this earlier. So, and I have kids, and you have kids. When you're traveling, then do you just pin a bunch of movies to, I don't know, their iPad or something for the plane ride from Unity?
Yeah, that's what I do. And typically,
Okay.
and it, the way that we do this, it's even like last minute. It was, I just flew up to San Francisco. I was on the tarmac.
Sure.
As I was on tarmac, of course, what always happens, like the Wi-Fi's broken on our flight. So I don't want to listen to music. So, I quickly opened up Unity. I downloaded 5 albums, right?
Okay, yeah.
It took something like maybe a minute and a half to get
Wow.
all 5 of those albums to download to my phone. When my kids are getting on flights, I regularly just download whatever movies it is that they want. And because we optimize the content for the device, I don't need the movie that's designed for my big flat screen TV in my living room.
Sure.
I don't need that on their iPad mini, right? They can have a smaller version of it. So Unity will transcode it into a small version. It gets to their iPad very quickly. And as soon as we're done on the flight and they don't want it stored locally anymore, because of course it's taking up storage.
Sure.
We just undownload it. You just remove it from local storage. And everything is back to normal. So, depending on sort of, what your personal, scenario is, whether you're in your car, you're getting on a flight, Unity's really optimized around, I want access to something right now, and I didn't plan ahead.
Totally. Yeah, and I think that's most people's thing. And like the best thing that I've found to date before kind of you and I met was piling a bunch of movies on an external hard drive and then basically plugging it into a Mac or a laptop, I should say, and then either copying those movies or to the local hard drive, or trying to copy them to a bunch of devices like the night before I was to travel, which, like you said, is sometimes you forget, sometimes you don't want to watch that movie, and carrying a hard drive around with your entire movie collection, like you don't want to lose that, right? You worry about that stuff. So,
yeah.
Like it's inconvenient.
Yeah, the biggest thing, because those are the exact same things that I went through. And I think the biggest thing is that it just always requires you to plan ahead, right?
Yeah.
You always have to think, okay, well, before I leave, I have to remember to do something. And I don't know what everyone else is like, but in my life, like I almost never remember to do that stuff.
Sure,
there
me
are
either.
countless times to where, before we built Unity, I'm like, oh, I want to watch that movie that I have that I haven't seen yet. It's like, oh, great, I didn't put it on my phone, right? So. Or, it's an album that I bought that, I'm not going to be able to download from iTunes onto my phone because there's no storage. So there's just continuously these scenarios to where I'm trying to figure out what it is I have to remember to do before I go do it. And a lot of people, it's just not convenient for them. Certainly it wasn't for me, such to the extent that I wanted to start a company to fix it.
Sure. So I'm curious, though, to know a little bit more kind of about the tech side of things. Like, you're basically optimizing files on the fly for the device they're going to. You must have some pretty good processing and server power in the back end to kind of do that on the fly.
Well, we have an unfair advantage to companies even like Netflix and others, and I know that's kind of a bold statement, but bear with me and it'll make a lot of sense. I mean,
sure.
Netflix is an immensely powerful company with a lot of resources and probably as much computing power as anyone else out there. But they've got a problem with the way that their architecture is set up that puts them at a disadvantage. And that is they always have to plan for capacity. What are the maximum number of people that are going to connect to, let's say, our streaming servers, and always be ready for that. And then all of a sudden at peak times, everyone's talking to those servers and they slow down. So if you've experienced what I have, there's those times where starting your Netflix video takes
Totally.
a minute, maybe even more, right? Sometimes
Yep.
it just keeps doing that for like a minute and a half and then just stops. With Unity, you're talking to your computer. How many people are accessing that computer and streaming your content when you're trying to do that? Nobody. It's your computer.
Sure.
So, when you look at the modern laptop or desktop, those are more or less server-grade pieces of hardware. They're very, very powerful. They've got a lot of resources, especially when you consider that we're only making it stream maybe a song at a time, or a movie, or send over several photos or a document. So, the unfair advantage we have is that the average person's computer is quite powerful, and they're the only one accessing it. So we have almost an unlimited amount of resources for that, in the sense of what we need to use it for. It's just far, far more powerful than what we even require. And that's why what will happen is the moment you select, let's say, a movie that is, let's say it's a 5 gig movie that's some feature film on your home computer, we can transcode that, put it on the wire, and have it be playing on your phone in, on average, under 5 seconds. And there's never peak demand because you're the only one accessing it.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And that's actually really interesting to me. So is there, I guess, like, I'm curious to know, like, obviously I've seen the interface and whatnot. I'm curious to know kind of what can the user kind of expect from kind of an interface, in the sense that it from what I know about the product, basically you've kind of broken them up into like a music category, a videos category, a photos category, files, and then kind of a sharing category. Are you guys looking at expanding outside of those categories, or kind of what's the future that you guys are kind of see, that you're going to add kind of in 2016, or where do you want to take this thing?
Right. So there's a couple big initiatives that we have this year. One is that we won't be expanding what it is that we do within our app, because quite frankly, it does, if anything, too much, right?
Okay.
It allows you to access your music and your video. Your videos, your home video, your TV shows, your movies, everything, all your photos, right, and your documents.
Sure.
So really, it's for most startups, I'd recommend don't do things like that because it's just way too broad.
Sure.
So we're certainly not going to be expanding our coverage. What we will be doing is expanding the platforms Unity runs on. So right now, when you install Unity on your computers, it will let you from your iPhone stream all of the content on those computers to your phone anytime you want. Later on in March, we'll be releasing an Android app. So we'll finally have Android in the mix to expand the platforms. And the Android app will more or less be the same as the iPhone app.
Okay.
So for Android users can now also stream content directly to their phones. We will then be introducing our desktop software. And this changes the way you use Unity on your computer, because instead of it just serving content to your phone, you'll actually be able to use Unity in the entire UI we have in a similar way that appears on your phone, but obviously with a much bigger screen, access all the content across your computers. So you could be on your laptop accessing things that are on your desktop in a different location.
Interesting.
And vice versa. So the desktop software will become much more functional the way that the mobile app is. And then lastly, it is that we want to begin building inroads with online storage partnerships, the first of which we're completing now and we'll be releasing in the next few months. But what this will do is we like to think of this as making online storage vastly more useful. Because like I said, it's hard. Most people don't pay for online storage because it's a bit complicated and it's a bit pricey. What we believe, though, is that we can make it far more useful. We can make it to where you don't have to manage putting stuff into the cloud or thinking about what's there and what isn't or how to organize that storage. We can take care of all of that for you so that when you want to access something, you simply go into that same convenient UI for looking at your music and picking your favorite playlist and then playing it. So the big things are expanding our platforms and integrating with online storage so that we can drive more utility, not only for our users, but also in those big markets with those big companies.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And being able to index content and access content that I have online and on, my many different computers and devices is actually really useful for pretty much everybody nowadays, because everybody has at least a computer and a phone. They might even have a tablet. They might even have a second phone. They might have a couple of tablets. They might even have another computer, right? So it's just the more and more you kind of get into this, the more and more you realize that how scattered all our stuff is, right? And pulling it into one interface is awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So I am curious though to know, at some point, have you ever thought about maybe streaming full applications to different devices, or is that just not really in the roadmap ever?
Well, it's not in the roadmap now. We've actually had a lot of people ask about that.
Okay.
And I like to think, it's easy for companies to sort of, especially ones that have broad value propositions like us, to say, well, how do we get bigger? And quite frankly, I think we're too big, at least in terms of our technology already. I really believe that the best tech companies build platforms that other people can work with, and we can both mutually increase our markets. And this sounds similar to how I describe online storage. A lot of people look at us and say, well, wow, with Unity, I don't need online storage. That's partially true. If you have a computer at home, you can just have Unity, always make that content available to you on your phone. But that's not really what it's designed for. Online storage is a good product, right? I couldn't live without it.
Sure.
But it's a different product from what we do. And applications that are out there, they're becoming more and more desktop, web, and mobile, so that they're cross-platform. So I'm not sure that we need to do anything around the application space. We've seen other companies that, let's say, let you look at photos, then integrate, other third-party SDKs to edit those photos and do things to them. And I don't know that that's worked well for a lot of those companies. In fact, most of them have stopped. So I really want to solve the problem of access. Mm-hmm. When it comes to other things, whether it's photo editing or, other things like that, I don't really want us to get into that space and encroach, in those other markets. It's going to detract us from, I think, doing what we do best for our users.
No, I think like you bring up, I kind of asked you that question because I knew that was going to be your response. And I think you bring up a really interesting point there is like, you have a platform, you have a objective, you've met that objective, and like you get these requests from people to add features that aren't true to your core business or kind of mission, right? And it makes a lot of sense to just like say, yeah, that's a good idea, but that's not for us, right? And that makes a lot of sense. And I think sometimes startups just chase after almost like their customers' feedback and tails a little bit and say like, oh, if we add this feature, we're going to get a bunch more clients. But you end up like just having this crazy fragmented product that nothing really works well because you kind of went down all these kind of tangents that wasn't really true to your core of the reason you built the product for.
Yeah, that's really common. I mean, what you're describing is, a lot of companies, they pivot very, very quickly. Sometimes it's really prudent to pivot your business, right? Sometimes you're looking at what you have a hypothesis and, on market demand, and it's just wrong, right? And you need to realize that if it is wrong, then you need to adjust it. You need to find, what is right. Maybe it's something very similar. Maybe it's something totally different. So I do think the pivot for a lot of companies is very, very legitimate. For us, we're pretty unconventional. There's absolutely a market for what we do. That market is essentially the entire developed world. Yep. There are hundreds of millions of people in the U.S. that hit our primary user characteristics of two computers and a smartphone. So we know there's a market. The problem is that no one has ever built anything like this. So it's hard to develop that market. That said, we deeply believe in what it is we're doing. It's very, very technical. It requires a lot of investment. So, we've always been a company that is building big software in a modern age to where people, a lot of investors, don't want to invest in big software. And a lot of users are accustomed to using little tiny software called mobile apps or online services and things like that. So we're very unconventional, but what we're doing is incredibly demanding. So it's really taken a lot of commitment on our part to not prematurely just throw in the towel and say that we're going to move on to something easier. So, we're maybe a bit different than a lot of companies, and I've got a lot of friends whose startups have pivoted, and they've made really smart choices doing that. In our case, we'll sort of see, how being different works in this day and age.
Sure, no, but I think that's important, and I love the companies like you guys that are solving like a real problem with, and it's hard, right? Like what you're doing isn't easy, like you mentioned, right? Like it's complicated. There's a lot going on in the background, and I think what the user, I think people that aren't in the tech space, what they don't understand, the easier it is for the user to use, the more work it is for the design and development team, and the more complexity that's going on in the background. And I'm not complaining. That's the reality of it, right? And
it's true. No, that's true.
Yeah, and like I've worked in software for a number of years, and I understand that. And trying to explain that to people sometimes people get that, sometimes people don't get that. But and that's why partly why Apple's done so well and other companies have done so well that are because their stuff's so simple, but there's so much work that goes on to make that stuff really simple.
Yeah, and there's no shortage of feature requests when it comes to our user base looking for more features. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of times the feature requests are fantastic featers, right?
Sure.
I mean, they're things that we've maybe already thought of and internally have been on our roadmap that we want to do. But I would say that as soon as you throw software out into the real world, you stop being able to develop it in the way that you can before it's out there. You now have to support it. Right? Before you launch it, you're just developing it. Once you launch it, you're also supporting it. And that really changes the dynamic within a company and its objectives and goals, because not only do you have to make sure it keeps working with the wide variety of use cases and products and scenarios that people use it in, you have to try and grow it. So it's one of these things to where, you have to be judicious. When I look at our roadmap, there's a variety of things that, make Unity a lot more fun, being able to stream Unity to your TV, not just stream it to your TV, but have an app on the TV.
Sure.
Or integrate it with things like CarPlay from Apple or, Android's in-car solution. So, there's a lot of fantastic things that we look at that, I'm extremely excited for us to do because, quite frankly, I'm going to be using them myself.
Sure.
But it's one of those things to where sometimes you have to bite the bullet and get a lot of other things done, which sometimes frustrates your users. They want to see you add new features, but you're concerned that you don't just break the product by doing that continuously.
No, I think that's really good advice, and I think a lot of people, especially kind of new people into the startup space, kind of forget about that, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's good. It's good that you're mentioning that. I think it's really useful advice for people. One thing I am curious about, though, is how do you guys plan on monetizing this?
Yeah, so we have the benefit of our users because we don't store anything, right?
Sure.
We don't have any, like I said, what we store about you is your username and password, right? Password's obviously an encrypted hash, and your username is just your email account.
Yeah.
So our users are very, very, very affordable for us. So we haven't had pressure to monetize what I would say is prematurely.
Okay.
And it's given us the ability to really sort of understand which people do we want to monetize and which do we not, right?
Okay, interesting.
We don't want to, it's not realistic to monetize everybody, but we do think that, especially because of our cost structure, we can get more and more people to use the product and not have to pay us. So for us, what we've spent the last 4 to 6 months doing is understanding where is that line in the sand, if you will, to where you have the casual user versus the power user. What are the things that those power users do? And the only real word I can use to describe the power user is reliance, right? Their usage of the product is more around their reliance on how it gives them access. So we've been figuring out what are the 4, 5, 6 features that only get used by some people some of the time, so that we can say, okay, the premium version of our product is really structured around those people who've come to rely on it. And I think we're close to having that locked up, and we'll start building our paywall in the next couple of months. It'll probably be before summer that we launch the paid version of Unity, the premium plan.
Okay.
And it'll likely have something between 4 or 5 features that are specific to people who use the product a whole bunch. The benefit is that because, again, our users are so inexpensive in terms of the cost to support them, we won't have to charge very much for the premium version of Unity. We can charge $3, maybe $4 a month, and still, which puts us in the very lower end of the cost of online services out there comparatively. When you look at online stores, it's
Sure.
10, 15, $20 a month.
It's cheaper than a Starbucks coffee.
Yeah, it's like it's the cost of a cup of coffee each month, and you always have access. So, the goal for us is to find the right mix of those features and also the right pricing, so that the people who really love using our product are, if this is at all possible, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, they're actually perfectly happy to pay.
Sure. So I'm curious then, are you self-funded? Did you guys raise some money? And you don't have to talk numbers. I'm just curious to know kind of how you guys are funding this right now.
We have. We originally raised a relatively small angel round.
Okay.
We were then able to actually start working on, it was a hobby. Unity was a hobby between my co-founder, Mike Abraham, and I.
Okay.
For a while, we really didn't know if it was going to be possible to build it, quite frankly.
Okay.
Ultimately, after about a year and a half or so, we realized it wasn't impossible. It was just really, really damn hard. So we raised a small bit of angel money. We were able to hire our first, 2 additional full-time engineers.
Okay.
That got us to a prototype that got us a seed round that actually let us hire, a couple more people that let us build product and take it to market. And it was last year that we raised our Series A financing. So we've gone through a few rounds of angel and institutional investment. And, what is incredibly likely is that, when you're building something this big, the first company I started was bootstrapped. We self-funded it, and we grew professional services revenue that funded the development of our software division. So I've done it both ways, where you self-fund and where, you raise VC. I'm not sure there is a best way. There's just the way that works for your company. And certainly for us, with as demanding as this technology is to build, and I think certainly as evidence to that, there is, an absence of companies out there that are apparently competing with us, because just no one builds software like we do.
Sure.
We certainly will have to raise more money in the future in all likelihood.
Sure. So I'm curious, you have an office in San Diego and Boulder, correct?
That's right. Our engineering team is in Boulder, where Mike and I actually started the company.
Okay.
And our business, product design, all of that is in San Diego. I would never encourage people to have remote offices or workers, really, because as things start to scale, it becomes incredibly difficult. But in our case, Colorado's investment climate is not sufficient for, in my opinion, my personal opinion, it's not sufficient for building a big company, right? That needs a lot of capital.
Sure.
Now, I say that with there being a lot of companies that have raised a bunch of money in Colorado, and big capital-intensive companies that do really, really well. But the reality is that those are few and far between, and we needed an investment climate where we could raise money building a really complicated, grandiose type of plan. And California is just the most well-suited for that.
Sure.
So I moved back to California when we realized that we really wanted to make a go of it. We very quickly raised, several $100,000, and we were off to the races. We thought we'd consolidate, but we just realized that, there's great reasons to do business in California. There's great reasons to do business in Colorado. And we just kind of kept it the way that it ended up being, co-located.
Sure. No, I'm curious to know, as we're kind of coming to the end of the show, any tips for people that have kind of a similar situation where you kind of have 2 offices and you're doing remote work, though? Like, any tools or tips that you find for collaboration or kind of getting things done, because it, like you mentioned, it can be very tricky.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first advice I'd say, and I mean it as serious as any advice I can give, don't do it.
Okay.
I mean, that's absolutely the best advice. Like, don't do it. And
Okay.
I've talked to countless people who are like, well, look at all these big companies that have workers all around the world. It's like, yeah, I know about all those companies. Don't do it anyway.
All right.
Okay, so it's just, if there's anything you can do not to co-locate, do that, right? I mean, ultimately, the reason we didn't is we just have such a great team of people, and I love working with all of them. And we knew that everyone wouldn't stay if we consolidated in one place.
Okay.
And it would have broken my heart to not be working with the people I work with. I love what we're doing, and I love the people I'm working on it with.
Sure.
And so we didn't consolidate. But I got to say, if you don't have that emotional attachment to your team, absolutely don't co-locate your company. Put it in one place. It makes everything better 100% of the time. So that said, if you are co-located, I think you really have to find tools that let the teams, to the greatest extent possible, feel like they're interacting with one another. So in our offices, we have big, giant TVs with like HD video streaming between them, so that if we're going to have a meeting, it's always, quote, face to face. It's over video.
Okay.
You've got to spend money on travel so people get to, spend time with one another and hear one another. But the biggest problem with co-locating is that, especially if it's broken up by function in the way that ours is, there's no cross-pollination of information and activity, right? So you just end up with people really, quite frankly, just not knowing what's happening.
Sure.
Right? The marketing team just doesn't understand what dev is doing and maybe why our release is taking longer. And the dev team doesn't understand why are certain decisions being made that result in us getting certain designs or roadmaps or things like that. And that is an enormous danger to any company. What you really want is people to feel connected to decisions and activity. So, you have to find ways that people are able to feel connected to what's happening, to the decisions, to the activity, to the strategy. Because ultimately that's what will result in apathy internally and certainly in turnover.
Sure. No, Erik, we're out of time, but let's close the show with kind of promoting where people can find you guys online and any other social media links you want to promote.
Sure. So you can check us out, learn more about what Younity does at www.getunity.com. Younity is Younity. Our software is free, so go to the website, download it to your computer, put it on your phone after that. We always love hearing what users are doing with it and what we ought to do next. We're on Facebook, so we're on Twitter at Twitter/GetUnity. So check us out. Let us know what you think, and we hope that we get to keep doing this for a long time and keep making it a lot better month by month.
Again, man, I really appreciate you doing this. This has been awesome. I look forward to following your progress throughout the rest of the year and beyond. And I think what you guys are doing is really cool. So, I look forward to keeping in touch with you. And thanks again for doing this.
Thanks so much, Kevin. It's great talking to you.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.